Welcome everybody to our Tiva webcast, Reimagining Change. My name's Irfan Azar. I'm head of cloud here at Tiva, and I'm joined by Rob Epstein, who I'm going to let introduce himself. Hello, Rob. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. So, as you said, my name's Rob Epstein. I work at Microsoft in our device partner team, looking after partners like HP and yourselves. Been at Microsoft for 20 years and done a variety of roles, including being the product manager for Windows for the UK.
Thank you very much for that. I'm really excited about talking to you today. A big hot topic for us and our customers has been this transition. It's a cycle, Rob. We go through it regularly. I'll get the elephant out the room, if I'm honest with you. I did think Windows 10 was going to be the last Windows, as Microsoft supposedly said. So what's your response to the first question I know everybody's going to ask?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Officially, we never actually said Windows 10 was going to be the last version. And of course, this has been going for a number of years now. So Windows 11's sort of over 3 years old. I think the point about the change was we made a couple of changes. Firstly, the user interface is very slightly different. And so users expect a different number when they see something different. The actual real critical reason, of course, is that we've sort of drawn a line from a hardware perspective and said that Windows 11 requires a certain level of hardware in order to deliver the security benefits that were so important as we move to the new operating platform.
Well, thank you for that. We are definitely going to deep dive into the security aspects. It's a critical component of the conversations we're having and the technology landscape today. So we will definitely dive into that. But I really just want to start off on this transition from Windows 10, Windows 11. Obviously, I'd like to cover off some timelines, end of life, and really what that might look like from a high level before we dive in a bit deeper.
Yeah, sure. So look, this is a fairly standard cycle that Microsoft goes through. The length that our operating systems last for, and in fact the support statements that we have, those have been published for decades, literally on the website, and there's nothing different around Windows 10. It goes officially end of support. It's actually extended support on the 14th of October 2025. So we're now, as we record today, about 230 odd days from that. In fact, if you count working days, wow. Allowing for sort of weekends and bank holidays, we're under 170 working days. So the pressure is cranking for those who haven't yet made their move to get on with planning the transition. And that's absolutely where we say engage partners like yourself to help them do that.
Just to push you on that point, though, this cycle seems short, or are you saying it's not? It's actually the same?
No, I mean, it'll be 10 years since Windows 10 was introduced. Right. So that's a sort of fairly standard, cycle for Microsoft.
It is.
And the other nice thing here is that this is an easier transition versus the previous one because the underlying platform is very much based on the same operating system. And so, for example, you're going to see, well, and actually, in fact, we know from our own data, 99.7% app compatibility. If an app works on Windows 10, it's going to work on Windows 11. And that's going to make life a lot simpler for IT teams as they make the transition.
And a lot of customers have come back to us about actually the hardware requirements, which is a driver for change, which I do want to touch on.
Yeah.
But I really would like to ask about that resistance that we've historically had with IT cycles for desktop and laptops, and how IT managers have found it difficult to manage that change. I really suspect what you're telling me is this time it's going to be simpler, but if you could just elaborate on that a little bit more, how that change won't be as big.
Yeah, look, I mean, understandably, sort of the traditional mantra, if it's not broken, why fix it, etc. And so there's always that resistance to change. It takes time to get the end user compute platform right and delivering value to users. And more importantly, IT teams, we understand, have just, massively stressed with a huge long list of projects within their companies because IT is now so central and software to the way that all companies work. If you look back through previous transitions, Windows XP to 7, 7 to 10, there's been a lot of underlying platform change. That's required an awful lot of rewrites of applications to make them compatible, of relying on your ISVs and software vendors to drive that compatibility. And that really isn't the case this time around. The other big thing is broadly the tools that people will use to manage their end user estate are going to be the same between 10 and 11. So that's going to simplify the transition as well.
Great, and we have seen a lot of organizations move some of those workloads into SaaS applications, and I'm interested to talk a little bit about how that authentication process might be improved with Windows 11. It's some exciting feature benefits we're seeing there. Just to touch a little bit more on that buy-in and resistance to change, I just want to focus on how that adoption piece you might see when it comes to end user changes and how we might help our customers with that adoption. Here at Tiva, we have invested in an adoption team, and they are specialists in helping people utilize Microsoft 365 and other tools and really adopt some of the newer technologies, especially with Copilot, which we're going to move on. But it'd be great to get your insight on what that adoption piece might look like.
Yeah, I mean, look, at Microsoft, almost all our business goes through partners. We work so closely with partners like yourselves, and that's the key thing. You know, ultimately, you'll provide the service that helps those customers do the adoption. You know, I think, again, looking at the core platform, there's minimal changes to the user interface. You know, there's always some people that kind of go, hang on a second, you've just moved things, they look slightly different. But broadly, you know, I think, people are just much more tech savvy nowadays, but also, I say, minimal changes. One of the big changes, oddly enough, is now the taskbar kind of centers everything so that Windows is looks beautiful, but is in the center. I have to say, to be honest, you can move that back to the left, and I've done that personally. I'm just so used to where the where the start menu is, but that's personal choice.
Muscle memory.
So and obviously at Microsoft we have a lot of adoption tools that are out there to help people with the transition. So there's a complete Windows 10 adoption kit you can download, and that will help your teams, you know, push out communication to the users, and that's really key throughout the whole process to keep communication going.
So we have used that adoption kit as the foundation of our adoption engagement. What's really interesting is how there's going to be some new features that are different and enhance that experience. So could you just touch on some of the newer features in Windows 11 that Windows 10 doesn't have, and how that might be a game changer in some scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably breaks down into sort of three broad buckets. The first is absolutely security. Windows 11 turns all the security on by default, has new security features, and there's more coming in releases coming next year as well to keep the platform even more secure than Windows 10, and that's essential in this day and age. The second is around management and ease of upgrade and maintenance going forward. So IT teams should find this easier to deploy and easier to maintain. Lots of improvement there. And then, probably the important one that, many leaders are interested in is what's it going to change for the user. And there's a lot more sort of AI features infused through the operating system. And that's everything from things like, in File Manager now, we're using AI to assess what a user is likely to want next and surfacing the files for them. And even little things like, Paint allows you to do things. I know it sounds like a crazy thing, who uses Paint, but actually it's got AI tools built in to do things like background removal. Now, if you've got a media department or a content creation department, even people just building PowerPoints, that ability to put any graphic in, get the background removed, speeds things up, and that's sort of the AI infusion. And that's really, injected all the way through. So we think it delivers better productivity and a user experience.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that file system now presenting suggestions that it might think based on behavior. Really, AI comes into its own when it can predict what might happen and get that right most of the time. That is real productivity gains that you might see. We might not experience it day to day as a massive impact, but when you add those little components up, it can achieve a considerable time saving. So thanks for pointing that out. Just reverting back a little bit, I wanted to talk about the hardware requirements. So there is new minimum hardware requirements, and we've got some technology partner with us today, HP, who are sponsoring this webcast as well. So it'd be great just to talk about what the latest hardware is doing to enable some of the best features within Windows 11.
Yeah, so the baseline in terms of Windows 11 compatibility is around CPU, too long a list of different silicon to get into what is and what isn't compatible, and critically TPM2 chips as well, which is about the security baseline to ensure that hardware basis is there. So from a security point of view, a lot of capabilities within Win 11 that does require new hardware. That the key thing to keep in mind, of course, is new hardware also has lots of other benefits. So when companies are sweating their assets for sort of 4 or 5 years, that's fine. But you're going to see massive, not only productivity boosts from better performing hardware, but things like, now we're all doing hybrid work of some description or other. You're going to get a lot more out of the platform from a communication and collaboration perspective. HP have on their new devices devices, they've built things like the dongle for their poly headphones into the device. It's one less thing to carry, or to etc. They've got lots of AI in the way of noise reduction, great cameras, and then actually HP in particular have their ESC chip. So it's an additional security chip that they put in, which enables a whole load of their Wolf security, and that sits on top of Windows and makes the system even more secure.
We are going to touch on and talk about the zero trust approach to security within not only Windows 11, but actually the wider Microsoft approach. Before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about personas, and we have an exercise our adoption team takes organizations through to build a persona exercise and make sure the right software, specifically Microsoft 365 licenses, and the right hardware is selected by the right group of people. So just some of your thoughts on persona building and how that can help really get the right product and right solution in front of the end user.
Yeah, look, I mean, great to hear that you do that. I think it's important, has been for a while, to go out. And at the most simplistic, that's about sort of saying, if you have frontline workers, those people who are out there, whether it be in retail or, you know, on the front line of delivering services to customers, do they need a very different IT environment? Do they need a smaller, lightweight device? And they'll need a different set of software.
It might need to be ruggerized, for example.
Absolutely. All that kind of technology. And again, HP can help with that. Then when you look at the traditional sort of office or knowledge workers, again, how many people are mobile versus either full-time at home or not, and what they may need, as well as different performance capabilities where you've got graphic designers, etc. So the basics of doing that persona work is absolutely critical. Now, I think this is going to become even more important as we go forward. And the reasoning is because, you know, we're starting to introduce, you know, hardware to some extent at a greater change in terms of the hardware capabilities. So very recently, Microsoft's announced this idea of a Copilot Plus PC, which is an advanced AI, sort of next-gen AI PC that has a new NPU chip in. Not going to bore people with technicalities, but it's going to unleash a whole new array of AI software. Now, companies are going to need that in certain places and at different times, depending on the software adoption. So you're probably going to want to think about moving assets around users to really maximize the return on investment, put the latest, greatest hardware with the right bits to the right users. And then as something new come out, you may want to then move existing assets, you know, to other users. So I think understanding the personas, understanding what the hardware can do today, ever more important, and having that agility to maximize that ROI is going to be key.
So that's a great tip. Actually, what you're saying is if you've got a persona that's a power user, that device can, after a year and a half, 2 years, be passed to someone who is not really utilizing hardware to the extent a power user might, allowing the power user then to test new devices or actually deploy new devices out to those power users so they can leverage those enhanced features like Copilot Plus on the PCs.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we're sort of already all used to doing this because we sort of take our phones and we pass them down to our kids, right? Yeah. And then, you know, that's the sort of trickle down in the family. And it may be a similar sort of thing, but we're finding the pace of change of the technology is that much faster. You know, already, you know, Intel have a whole raft of chips with initially had no AI capability. I say no AI, no dedicated hardware for AI, so the NPU. Now most of Intel's range has an NPU, but of certain capability. They've just introduced a whole new raft of machines that are sort of 4xing that initial AI capability. And we're going to see that probably double again sometime next year. So, you know, the pace change is increasing. It's important you maximize return on your assets.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because Tiva and its parent company Fulcrum have invested in a very capable and industry-leading DEX platform, so digital employee experience platform, that can help us understand really what the usage of the devices are like. So it really fits into what you're saying. We can assess if that power user is underutilized or overutilizing those devices and move them along to the right persona.
Yeah, and of course, you know, today most of the information on that is in the network already. It's about, you know, downloading the information and understanding it and being able to replay that back with management to define what's needed. Again, you know, as well as Intune, which is the sort of cloud management tools that IT teams are using these days, which has a whole raft of information. HP have their proactive insights, which can give you insight, like even down to things like how good the battery is,
Yeah.
what's the battery life likely to be left, or whether that machine just needs to get its battery swapped out, etc. So all of that data is coming directly from the network itself, and can be used and analysed by partners to help advise customers.
And we're seeing a real groundswell asking for that type of technology to help them get the most out of their investments, because we aren't sweating assets like we used to. However, we still need to get the most out of those technologies. So now focusing on the hot topic around AI, we are a partner that really drives the Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot engagement. We have a sister company in Razer that is a leader building platforms on top of Azure AI. So just talking about your views on how AI might change this landscape from an endpoint, but a wider Microsoft perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a huge topic, and clearly one that is excited within the broader business world. This is probably the biggest, most comprehensive platform shift that we've seen, literally in our lifetimes. We've seen the move from old sort of what they term client server technology through to sort of cloud and mobile. Here comes the AI wave, and boy, is it coming fast. The benefit of it is clearly the productivity gains that we're all going to see from it. I'm certainly using it, frankly, both in my personal life and in my business life all the time. Simple things like I had a partner say, we need you to record a video for us for our sales kickoff. And I literally just said to Copilot, I need a 90-second video script based on this, and it went off, understood everything around, for example, Windows 11 and AI for me, wrote me the script, even gave me sort of the images that should be on screen to accompany it. That took seconds, a small edit, and I'm away. So the shift is going to be huge. Now, for business leaders, there's a lot to consider and to understand. As you've said, there's Azure AI and what you can do, taking foundational models and building AI technology for your own company. Then there is the sort of standard AI that Microsoft offers through things like Microsoft 365 Copilot that allows you to drive productivity gains through all of your users based on your own company data in a secure way. And then lastly, of course, there's now going to be AI at the edge, which is where you can get more and more done on the device if you've got an AI-enabled hardware.
Thank you for that overview. I know Microsoft's mantra is a co-pilot for every person and a co-pilot agent for every process. It's interesting how you touched on got most of the work done, a small edit. I always say to our customers that it can get the majority. It's like having a personal assistant. You can get the majority of the work done, but you don't let it have the final cut or the final say. You enhance it a little sometimes a little bit more, but it really gives you the great foundation to put something really amazing together that you couldn't have done without putting a lot of work in to start off with.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it can type faster than I can. So I get the output quickly.
Yeah.
You touched on a couple of really important things there. Firstly, it's a co-pilot, not an autopilot.
Yeah.
It is there to help you, not do all the work for you. And even to this day, I wouldn't put anything out without having checked and verified myself, despite how good and sophisticated these things are. The other thing you mentioned there is this idea of having it as a personal assistant. Now, when we come to things like M365 Copilot and Copilot Chat, then absolutely it's that. And there's a lot of mystique from people maybe who have been in business a while and not used to this technology of thinking, like, how am I going to get my head around it? And actually, the beauty of this is it's just language. It's just a conversation. It's just English. If you can WhatsApp, you can Copilot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it literally is conversational. And so the advice I give people when they say, well, how do I get the most out of this? Is I say, assume you've just got a new personal assistant. Now, that assistant is an intern who is always on day one of their job. So you have to be really clear and precise with the instructions that you give them. But once you do, you'll be amazed at the responses.
And we have a dedicated adoption roadmap for Copilot. We've got some great adoption specialists in our team that can help customers take us through that journey. But we have taken that foundational approach from Microsoft, for example, using the GCSE framework. Look it up, people. But we can talk to us about it and we can tell you all about it. So it's fantastic that Microsoft are laying the foundation for partners like us to then enable our customers to use this technology. It can be a bit daunting, and sometimes people think it's a bit of hot air. If that is the case, if they do not use it effectively and learn how to do the basics. So a really key component of Copilot and AI readiness, and to mitigate things like bring your own AI or shadow AI, is getting the security readiness and the compliance right. So it's interesting you're talking about some of the core features being built into Windows 11 is the security component. So if we start opening up a conversation about Microsoft Zero Trust approach, I'd like to start with some of the security features within Windows 11.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, security is an enormous topic, and unfortunately, the level of threat, the level of bad actors out there, and the number of attacks is just exponentially increasing all the time. So the principle of zero trust, as I'm sure you know, is around assume that every interaction has to be checked and verified. You have to assume you're going to get breached. You need to have a plan for what happens when that does occur. And critically, you need to assume you need to effectively not trust everything.
Yeah.
So you
release
have to
privilege access.
Yeah, release privilege. So you've got to secure the identity, secure all the data. Whether it's in transit, on the device, etc. And the very basis for that is ensuring that you can trust the device. So from the moment that frankly it's built, but then it boots every time, all of those things are trusted and secured. And again, that hardware is built into the HP devices. And then critically, we're starting to see that move to identity-based security, where every user and every interaction, we're verifying that user has the authority to do whatever it is they're going to do or access that resource or that piece of data. So if you can't secure the identity, you kind of have nothing. And so moving to things like password lists become critical. And to do that, then you want things like biometrics. So you need devices that support, facial recognition or fingerprint login. And then, look, at the end of the day, the human's almost the weakest link these days in security. Unfortunately, the way that these, sophisticated threats are happening, it's social engineering. And so if you can get rid of things like passwords, if you can remove as much risk from the user, the better.
So looking at that journey, we have helped our customers using our Ativa's security roadmap. It's based on Microsoft Zero Trust principles, and we do declare, it actually is a declaration that identity is the new perimeter, and we focus on that. But then the first component that they're going to interact with the device is the access point that they're going to allow somebody to use. It's critical to get that secure as well. So talking about the biometrics and Windows Hello, just moving away from, sometimes people find it a little difficult to understand why actually an 8-digit key on your device is more secure than, a really long password in the browser, for example. So just touching on that, the TPM chip and how that's working and allowing you to connect via web apps. Am I correct now?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, the most important thing is all around two-factor authentication. So ensuring that you have two things that verifies an identity at any moment in time. And so the point you make about things like PINs and Windows Hello is you're using the device as one factor and then something from the human as the second factor, which could just be as simple as that PIN code, but is more likely and better if it's biometric as well. We're all kind of familiar with this now because most of our banking apps require us either to get a PIN texted to us or to use an app on our phones to authenticate, often via biometrics as well. So it's the same principles of ensuring that the person who is doing the login is that person and that they're entitled to access those resources. But of course, it sounds very simple. And actually, that's the beauty from a user point of view. Coming up on the train today, open my laptop on the train. The camera looks at me, knows who I am, logs me in. I need to do nothing. I can never forget my face, whereas I can forget my password quite easily. But you've got, from a technical perspective, quite a lot to implement behind the scenes to make that work. So for organizations, maybe without the deep security skills, working with partners like yourselves, building it on the right hardware with that hardware baseline is key. And then you can layer up the technology, as needed. Kudos
to Microsoft here. That was complex a few years back, but now the deployment of Windows Hello for Business has become a lot simpler, and the management of the devices using Intune is really second to none. Microsoft have become a leader in the unified endpoint management platform, and I'm a massive advocate for Intune when it comes to managing those devices. We've had a number of customers who've had to move from what used to be called System Center configuration manager now, and are making that journey to Intune. So be interesting to get your insight on what that management component, how it improves now with tools like Intune.
Yeah, I mean, look, this has definitely been a journey, and to some extent, to come back to the whole migration from Windows 10 to Windows 11, what we're actually seeing is a lot of organizations use this moment. They know that the 10 to 11 migration itself is quite easy. So they're actually saying, I'm going to go to cloud management, moving, as you say, from config manager to Intune, because that gives me this cloud first, modern management approach. And frankly, that's also the baseline for the identity management and the security management and all those other things. And it's great, as you say, we're called out as a leader in most of the sort of Forrester reviews and other analyst reviews on Intune. Now, if you were a year out from a Windows migration, I'd say great, absolutely do that first, because that can be a bigger, more complicated piece of work. When we're now less than 170 business days to go, I think the risks involved in not migrating to getting off of 10 before end of support, I would say use the tools you have to just get to 11, because you can use whatever tool you have to make that migration. And then absolutely, you should be heading towards Intune management, partnering with people like Tiva to do that. And then in future, when you want to go cloud first, then you can do that as you swap machines out over time. So there are ways of still getting to 11 and getting to modern management without one having to delay the other.
I think that's great advice, especially due to the short time scales we've got. Just now trying to focus on that leadership piece. How do we enable our IT managers, IT directors, CIOs, and beyond? How do we enable them to make this as seamless as possible? Again, I'm going to use that word, it's change. I agree with you. You said it. I'm going to hold you to it. You said it's the Windows 10 to Windows 11 move is easy. That's a brave statement to make, but actually I concur. I think that we've done it numerous times. It has been successful. Very little, if any, disruption. Application compatibility has been terrific. I think that's great because there isn't significant changes underneath. I think the new security features have really enabled us, to enable our customers. So just focusing on how we allow those IT leaders to get this through. I'm going to be honest with you, help the leadership teams in their business understand that it's not going to be disruptive, and help them understand this is an iterative change rather than a whole revolution, as sometimes it has been.
Yeah, no, I think I would maybe split the problem in two, right? Or not the problem, the discussion in two. The first one is around users and how we drive the change for the users. The second one is around the IT organization itself and the change that they're maybe going to have to make and how to approach it. From a user point of view, as we've sort of highlighted already, the OS user interface has got minimal change. The applications are going to look and feel the same. And so broadly, I think for users, that's much easier. As we've already talked about, there are kits out there that help with that communication and training and enablement for users who need it. So that's less of a challenge. Now, when we come to IT and the work they have to do, yes, it's. I'm sure viewers will be able to say it's very easy for him to sit there smugly and go, it's easy, but we know there's a lot to do. And I accept that. Very few organizations are going to want to just move without having tested at least their critical line of business applications. And we would encourage them to do that. But again, even there, HP have a service that they can provide, through partners, which will do app testing, and they'll automate that process. So you can do it much quicker than previously. Microsoft, we actually have a free service called App Assure. So if you do find an application, even an in-house developed line of business application that for some reason doesn't seem to work under Windows 11, we'll help fix it for free. Because we know it's quite easy to do. Most cases it's around config, but if needed, we'll go all the way to Windows engineering and rewrite the operating system to guarantee that compatibility. And so it does become more around how you make the transitions internally within IT to that modern management. And here I would say to leaders, you really want to start thinking around where the value of your IT team comes. Because actually we often find the resistance to change comes from within IT, where people have always managed Windows a certain way, frankly, in some cases for 20 plus years, and they don't want to see that change. And they're concerned that if you move to a modern remote management, maybe outsourcing it to a partner like yourself, they're all going to be out of a job. And I tend to say to the IT teams and to leaders, really, have you not got a project list this long of things that IT need to deliver, and which of those are high value and which of them is just keeping the lights on? And these days, deployment and management of devices should be keeping the lights on. You should automate as much as possible, and you should outsource where you can.
I couldn't agree more. I think the time has come, and it has been happening for the last 5 years, where IT now have become the enablers. I think we need buy-in from key stakeholders in your business. But really, if the leadership are backing innovation and technology as a positive change and an enabler, it's incumbent on the IT team to deliver that positive change. And keeping the lights on should be a smaller component of that role. I know that's easy to say sat here, but I've sat in an IT manager's role as well. Sometimes it's very difficult when the end user's got some printer problems, and if they can't print, it's the end of the world. But I think you're right. We have made that transition now to where IT really need to be enabling the business to do more and reach their business objectives. So thank you for that insight. Moving on to really how we can use Microsoft's hardware along and the OS along with applications and services like Microsoft 365. We, as our program of adoption and persona exercises, we look at both the hardware usage and utilization, but we also take an in-depth look into things like the usage of Microsoft 365, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, and now Copilot. So I think Microsoft have really taken the next step when it comes to integrating the hardware with the OS, with the applications now. So just getting your thoughts on the journey it's taken to get to this point.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Microsoft 365 applications used to be known as Office, have been around for a very long time. They expand, and there's actually quite a lot of additional capability from the sort of core Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Hopefully, most people now are very familiar with Teams, which has sort of become the de facto sort of meeting platform, particularly post-COVID, as we're now in very much a hybrid world. And hopefully, this all has a familiar look and feel, and to some extent, whatever platform people are using, we've got that ability to ensure you can access from your phone. The beauty of moving everything into a cloud environment is, if you lose a device, if you break a device, if you leave one on the train, you can just pick up a new one and have it deployed quickly and have access to all your apps and your data very rapidly. Similarly, if you're out and about on mobile, you can do the same thing securely from your phone. So, that suite of being cloud built absolutely is there. And there's great new simple things. Actually, Windows 11 introduces something called Clipchamp, which is our new video editing capability. But actually more and more as we all start producing content like this, or, people want to put stuff out on LinkedIn and so forth, that ability to create simple videos or using team meetings and kickoffs, having that within Windows 11 out of the box is absolutely key. And the next level of expansion is going to be to start AI enabling all of this.
Exactly right. And I really like the point you made about Clipchamp. I'm not saying, people shouldn't use the tools they've invested lots of money in, but having your design and marketing teams having things like the Adobe tool set is amazing. But sometimes just a normal end user wants to make a video look a bit better, and you don't want to have to pay for an additional Adobe license for that end user. So Microsoft integrating those tools and building in the AI capability, I think is a real great innovation. And I love the point you made about how I feel when I'm on a Windows device and then I'm in a browser using Microsoft applications, or I'm using the desktop version of the application. That user interface really feels familiar across the board. It feels like there is a single design language, and when I prompt using Copilot in each of those areas, I tend to use the same format and it works the same way. So that really, I think, does help. So thank you very much for that insight into how the latest innovations from Microsoft are now joining together the different platforms. Finally, I just want to recap on how Zero Trust has become the core component of most security and initiatives and strategies, and it's definitely the one we advocate. And how tools like Windows Hello, passwordless, how Microsoft's conditional access in Entra ID is really changing the way we protect identities Intune is changing the way we protect devices. Things like Purview allow us to protect the data and also look at any data loss prevention and information protection. It's really that next step. Where do you see the next step in security coming? I know we've got the launch of Copilot for Security coming, but really, what are your thoughts on what the future might hold?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think the security challenges are only going to get worse and worse. We live in a very uncertain world, and the level of some extent state actors now involved in that security threat, makes life very complicated. That's why Satya introduced at Microsoft something called the SFI, the Security First Initiative, which fundamentally says for every single Microsoft employee, security is the number one job. And that, whether that be in product development through to how we work with partners to help train and ready enable that to go out to customers and ensure they're building security at every level, as you say, through their technology stack, from the hardware all the way through to absolutely individual, putting the security requirements against data, ensuring that the user who is trying to access that spreadsheet, that Word document, that internal SharePoint, has the rights and ability to do so. And we'll see more layers of security, more complexity to some extent, and that's where working with partners to help simplify is key. But it's also absolutely critical as we move towards AI, because of course AI is there to go in and work with the company's data, help people understand it, get value from it, create for them, and be their assistant in doing so. But if you haven't applied the right security to that underlying data, you could end up in a world of pain. And the beauty of the way Microsoft has done it is all of the security that's already layered up through, for example, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, that already determines exactly who's allowed to access what, that frankly should be applied the minute a new document is created. A level of security and trust is allocated to that. That all gets assumed by the Copilot and the agents. And so when you go to Copilot and say, write me a script for this video, it will go off across the company data and sort of understand that to generate its response, but only according to the security that's already been applied. So if I don't have access to a particular document, Copilot won't use that in its response.
And I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes that, we know OpenAI and ChatGPT, the free tools, nothing's really free. That data is being used for help teaching the models, but Microsoft are guaranteeing that your data will reside and stay within your tenant. But really, how you can break it down to the HR person who's got access to the HR folders, any AI they use will only give them access to the stuff they've already got access to.
Correct.
And it's if anybody else is trying to access that because they don't have access, they won't get it. But just to take it even further, if as a IT security team and the HR team, they feel actually that repository that I have got access to should not be used within results of Copilot, we can still apply restricted search, and Microsoft allowed us to have those additional tools to even drill down even further and apply that level of security. So I think having that Copilot readiness, AI readiness is critical. I know Microsoft have got significant funding in that area that we're helping deliver. So I think anybody interested in getting that Copilot readiness done should start from security and compliance and how Purview can help protect the right data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you wanted to start doing, if you like, generative AI based on public information, you can do that quite quickly. Again, you want to do that from a secure position of using your company login and ensuring you're logging into M365 Copilot chat, because that way, as you say, it's all protected. We don't use any of that response to train the models. Everything is trackable within the company environment, as opposed to using the sort of consumer free tools that are out there. And then beyond that, the implementation of really getting advantage from your business data, you don't want to do that until you've done that security review, until you've got all of the necessary tagging in place and the security steps in place.
Great. So I just want to wrap up with some of your final thoughts on how simple we can make the transition from Windows 10 to 11. Reiterating that important date, and I'd like you to repeat the number of working days, please, because that's critical. So I will, just talk to you about your final thoughts about the transition.
Thanks. Well, look, we've covered a lot today. We've talked about security. We've talked about the core Windows transition. We've talked about AI. And ultimately, all of this will definitely deliver value for customers. AI is going to be a huge revolution in productivity. And really, if companies aren't starting to build their strategy, they're going to get left behind. But before you do that, you've got to get your house in order. And I think there's a couple of things for that. Firstly, as we talked about, eventually moving towards modern management, which is the basis for zero trust security and for being able to secure all of that data as you move into an AI world. And to get there, you want to be on a Windows 11 platform, frankly, because, of course, Windows 10 goes end of support. To remind you people, that's the 14th of October 2025, so under 170 working days. And it's probably, because we didn't touch on this, worth remembering that when we get to that date, that means no more patches, no more updates, no more support, and that leaves users, really at risk from security perspective, as well as kind of the technology lag that they'll get from not being on a modern system. It's also worth pointing out that the M365 applications, they also won't be supported by Microsoft beyond that end of support date for Windows 10 when running on Windows 10. So you have to be on a supported platform. It's not that they'll stop working. It'll continue to work, but it's not supported. And therefore, if you hit an issue with any of those apps, you won't be able to get support from Microsoft. So there are real reasons companies need to take this seriously. The clock is very much ticking. Hopefully, people are on that journey. They've started their app testing. They've started understanding their devices and which ones will and won't support the upgrade. And wherever they are in that journey, engage with a partner like yourselves now to help finish that work off, get your apps tested, get your devices tested, start the move and the migration to modern management, so you have that foundation, zero trust security, and you can start building your strategy for AI adoption.
Rob, thank you very much. That summary and those final points were really succinct and concise. I think it leaves a lot for our listeners and people watching in regards to what they should do from next steps. Obviously, they can definitely contact us as a partner who can help them on that journey. But we really appreciate your insight and your time today. It's been really interesting learning about this transition from Windows 10 to 11. So thank you.
Thank you very much.